All right. Here we are at the beautiful Benjakiti Park on a Sunday morning, having a nice easy jog. Doesn't get much better than this. And I'm here with my friend Thomas, and he has been running for around 30 years total, is that right?
32, around 32 years, yes, correct.
Wow, okay. So, as I've been running just over 2 years, today we're going to chat to Thomas and hopefully share a bit of his wisdom and the things that he's learned over the last 3 decades of running. So, to start with, Thomas, can you tell us a bit about how you got started in running and what kinds of things you were doing back then when you started?
Well, I started running when I was about 6-7 years old due to my father, who was a runner and who still is a runner. And at that time in Germany, the idea was that you start off with track first. You know, you are still growing up, your whole skeletal system is not fully developed yet. So you would start off on track. That was the idea in Germany at that time. And we would do 800s, 1200s and 1500s. And over the years, that went then into 5Ks and 10K still on track. So when I was finally around 14 years old, I cannot remember that well, we then went on the road. And we basically just transferred the 5 and 10Ks to the road. And from there we moved on to half marathon when I was in my 16, 17 years old, and then up to a marathon in my 20s.
Okay, so it's a good way to skip forward until today. Can you say about, I'm sure you can remember what your training program was like back in those early years of track running. Can you say what your training program was like back then compared to what you do on a weekly basis now?
We would still do, when we started, we would probably have about 30 to 40 kilometer at that age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and you would gradually move up to about 60, 80 kilometers. And the approach was very, very basic. You would warm up anywhere between 2, 3, 4 kilometers, and then for the 800, 1200 and 1500 distances you would just do an endless amount of repeats just to exercise and train the speed endurance for races. So what happens is, in Germany at that time, and the ideas we were given by trainers and coaches, that instead of doing a warm-up of only 2-3K, would do one of 5K, 6K or 7K, and then of doing repeats of 20 times 100, 30 times 100, 8 times 400. You just increase the amount of the, or you just increase the distance within the repeats. So instead of 800s, you would do 1,000 or 2,000 meters.
Okay.
Or you would then move from 2,000 to 3 times 5,000. With a warm-up of 5 and a cool-down of 5. So that means you do about 20 to 25 K in total, of which 15K you would do in a tempo run, or alternative in intervals of 3 times 5.
Okay.
Once we approach like 14, 15, 16 years of age. So you just gradually increase overall mileage and the distance of the repeats itself and the distance of the tempo run.
Yeah.
Very basic approach.
And nowadays you still do your tempo runs and intervals and so forth, as you did back in when you were a child?
I do, yes, although you pay a price when you get older in terms of ability to recover after tempo runs and especially after intervals.
Right.
So whereas before I would do always, regardless there was a race or not, I would do one interval and one tempo run. I would normally nowadays do only either one interval or one tempo run in the week.
Okay.
If I feel well and don't tend to have any injuries which occur more often the older you become, I would still do, let's say on a Tuesday I would do an interval and then have a tempo run on a Friday, for example.
Okay.
And then you hot long run on a Sunday.
Okay. And the issue you raised about recovery changing as your body gets older, especially to higher tempo workouts.
Yes.
Leads me to my next question. I know that around 3 years ago, I think you changed your diet.
Yes, correct.
To one where you don't consume any animal products.
Correct.
Can you tell me about how and why that came about?
I live in Thailand since 7 years, and before, due to a workload, after I was 24, 25, I was not engaging in marathon runs anymore. I did 10Ks and 15Ks. Once I moved to Thailand in 2008, I started to have more time again and went back into marathon training. And I want to do it on a competitive level. That would mean for me to run sub 3 hours. And which I, regardless the age level, I would regard for hobby runners as a competitive level. However, I found it increasingly difficult to match the required times in training, let alone in the races. And it happened to be that on a race in Rayong, I met an Australian, and to cut the long story short, he is a vegan, as I found out later, and he ran that race easily below 3 hours. Of course, he looked fatigued and tired, but not to a level that you would normally expect. And it was only that I found out later that he's a vegan and that he was what you would call a health activist. He was running a website that found my interest, on which he had several links to websites related to veganism and also certain literature, which I then consulted and read and studied, and it made sense to me. Not so much because I would do it out of being an animal lover, but out of trying to improve my health, because what struck me is that this man, obviously not being a frequent runner, could so easily run below 3 hours.
Definitely, yeah.
And another matter is that this course is not easy. It's a consecutive line of up and downs throughout the whole distance. Not quite steep ups and not very strong downs, but you know, it adds up over the whole distance.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, there must be something to it. So I cut out dairy, all types of dairy products. Within the first 2-3 weeks, that was 4 weeks after I met this guy, end of November 2011. That was okay. And what I felt already, that in the mornings I didn't feel that tired anymore. Lineaments, joints are less stiff. And especially since I was a cheese lover,